Hello and welcome to today's tool presentation about creating simplified user interface graphics with Snagit 2021. It's really nice to have you all here. My name is Anton Bollen. I am the customer and market strategist for TechSmith, the creators of Snagit, and I will be leading you through this demo and workshop today. Real quick look at the agenda. I'm going to start with a very brief introduction into this topic of simplified user interface graphics, though I imagine a lot of you are already familiar with the premise of it, otherwise you likely wouldn't be here. Nevertheless, a short introduction never hurts. But then we'll switch to the main part of this tool presentation, and that is a sort of workshop portion where I'll be showing how, the different ways you can create simplified user interface graphics with the current version of Snagit. And I try to set this up in a way that you can hopefully also follow along if you want to experience this yourself. So a little bit like a workshop. And for that to work, all you need to do is ensure that you have the current version of Snagit 2021 installed, either as a full version or as a trial version. And in case you have an older version of Snagit on your machine, you can install the current version and the older version side by side. So if you have a few minutes and if you do follow along, go visit our website on the side, download the trial, and then we're ready to go on. And here are also instructions on checking which version you are actually running. If you're under Windows, go to the Help menu and then select About Snagit, and you should see that version number in the dialog right here on the bottom. And if you're on a Mac, you simply have to go up to the term or the word Snagit in the menu bar, and you should see your version number. All right. Let's talk about some problems that we are having in technical communication. I'm sure you can identify with some of those. It's hard to keep my visuals up to date in my documentations as the user interface constantly changes. Maybe you can relate to that, huh? Or localizing the media content is very expensive and also time consuming. And supporting multiple platforms means that you need to have similar versions of the same screenshot or visual. And in a lot of cases, the UI is showing distracting elements that take away from the core message and the essential workflow that you're trying to explain. And last but not least, we often have situations where the screenshot itself contains sensitive information or materials that are not destined to be shared outside with any clients or end users. And I think these problems are very common, and I'm not gonna lie, we also had those same problems internally at TechSmith on a regular basis, right? Our stuff was going out of date very quickly. It was visually rather complex, so it was hard for our users to see and follow that content in all necessary cases. Localization was being difficult, and. And so our user assistance team took a step back and they asked themselves, well, what if we designed our visual content to be more user-friendly and able to hold up to those UI tweaks? And they didn't invent the solution, but they started using a tactic quite a bit that is called Simplified User Interface, or SUI. And SUI is essentially a representation of a software interface that focuses on the essentials by stripping away temporarily or contextually unimportant elements. So in other words, we're going from a complex user interface like the one we're seeing right here on the left to a more reduced version on the right side that is in fact simplified, and only key elements, like in this case the tekom logo and a few other things, remain visible, while all other elements are being reduced to those simpler shapes. Let me show you another example. So we go from a drop-down menu right here on the left side where the command is File, Connect Mobile Device, to the one on the right where that same command, File, Mobile Device, remains recognizable and even easier to follow. However, that visual complexity and the distracting elements are more or less completely removed from the screenshot on the right. And that is a look and feel and effect that we are going for with a lot of SUI graphics. And there's a lot of companies who have been using SUI type graphics in their onboarding, documentation, marketing, and sales content. So here's an example from Microsoft. They've been using it extensively in their onboarding content. Here is an example from TechSmith itself. We have similar right-click menus. However, we have some parity issues between Mac and Windows version. They don't always look the same. However, by only using a simplified screenshot like the one we're seeing on the far left, we can use that same graphic for both Mac and Windows users because the base command of do a right-click and select edit text remains true and easy to follow. And here's one more example from an email. This came from Asana. They're using it a lot to introduce topics and introduce features to a new workflow or functionality. And now it is time to create some SUI graphics. The best way to create simplified user interface graphics is to start with a screenshot, and that is exactly what we'll do for this particular first exercise. I already have Snagit 2021 open in front of me. And if you want to follow along, I encourage you to do the same. I have the all-in-one profile selected, which is the standard capture profile, and I can start a screenshot by hitting the big red button, or right below you see my hotkey, which in my case is the print screen, which is usually the most convenient and fastest way to take a capture. As a next step, we need to decide what we want to take a screenshot of in order to simplify it. And for this example, I suggest we'll take a very simple drop-down menu, because that I think is a very common scenario in our world. And I think it's something we can all work on together. So in order to do that, I'm actually just going to open up my browser, because I would imagine we all have a browser. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing me right now. And almost all browsers have some form of drop-down menu, often in the top right, which gives you additional options. So let's say we want to instruct the users on clicking on the download options, or where to find the download options. So that is the instruction at heart. They have to click at the spot on the three dots and select the downloads. So in your browser, it might look a little bit different. If you're following along, just find yourself a similar drop-down menu that you can take a quick capture of in order to perform the next couple steps. So in my example, this looks good. The menu is open. I'm going to hit the print key on my keyboard, and I will get the Snagit crosshairs, as we can see right here. And now with this crosshair, I can select the area of my screen I want to capture. As I move it across, you can see it's already kind of jumping to particular options. So in this case, it's actually suggesting I could capture just this particular window. But I'm going to do a click and drag because I want to make sure I get the top right of the application as well. And now this will give me the so-called capture preview, where I can fine-tune my selection, make sure it's all good. Actually, this looks pretty awesome to me. And now as a next step, all I have to do is confirm my capture by clicking on the big camera icon on the bottom left. Once I have done that, the capture will open in the Snagit editor for further editing. And let's actually take a look at the Simplify option right away. The Simplify option or tool is found in the toolbar at the top. And if you don't see it in the top 10 exposed tools, simply click on More, and you should see Simplify as the third or fourth option from the top. So I'm going to select this. And now Snagit will have and offer me the tool and a variety of options on the right side. So let's go through those real quick. At the very top is an AutoSimplify option, which is quite powerful. And it is something that we improved in the current version 2021. We made the algorithm more accurate and faster, and the results reflect that. Below that is a color palette, which we can choose, define, adjust, and even save for further use. Then below that are a series of quick styles for drawing your own simplified elements on a new graphic, if that's what you want to do. And further below, also quite important, are the tool properties, where you can choose between a drawing tool and a move tool, and you have additional options for editing and viewing your content. But usually what I like to do as a very first step when I have a graphic I want to simplify is I simply go in and I turn on AutoSimplify. And I encourage you to do the same. All right, and now let's take a look and see what happened. Snagit automatically detects common shapes, text boxes, icons, and other similar types of screen content and replaces them with the familiar SUI shapes, as you can see right here. There's a lot of shapes that were created, and we'll get into that in a second, but nevertheless, all visible information is now simplified. The colors Snagit chooses are based on the color palette. And every time you open a new capture in Snagit and you open the Simplify tool, Snagit will analyze that screenshot and suggest 4 dominant colors that are within the image in order for you to use for your simplification. Yeah, that's why this also says image colors right here, because these are based on the colors that were found in this particular image. If I select another image, you will see that the suggested and available colors will have changed one more time. But let me go back here. But let me go back to our first screenshot right here. Before we go deeper into the color palettes, I do want to expose the tool properties at the bottom and select Show Original. This is only a preview mode. So this is only for you, the person who's editing the screenshot. And it's a fantastic way to actually see what was covered up, what's below it. And it really helps you while editing to orient yourself within an otherwise pixelated and simplified screenshot, because right now it's rather difficult to know what all is being covered up. So keep this option, Show Original, in mind. I find it quite handy. As a next step, I like to expose the parts of my screen that I actually do want to show in my graphic. So in order to do that, I select the Move tool right here on the bottom. And once I have the Move tool selected, I can go back into my screenshot and I can select options or boxes and delete them. So for example, I want to expose and show this user icon and this as well as this, because I believe it provides some valuable context for the user to see where in the application they are looking. The same applies to the little browser icons in the top. Further, we said earlier the instruction should be click on downloads. So of course I want to show where that download option is. And that would be this one right here. And I don't think it never hurts to expose the relevant hotkey in this situation. Okay, let's disable the original again so we can see what that screenshot looks like. All right, so far so good. But there's a couple more things that I want to do, because honestly, I find these dark purple or bluish boxes to be too dominant. I'm paying more attention to the boxes and not enough attention to the actual download option, which is the one that we want our users to focus on. So that is my cue to go take a look at the color palette that is being used up here. And so as said before, the colors are based on the dominant colors in the image. If I click on this, I do have other color palettes to choose from that come pre-installed with Snagit, such as this dark one, though that doesn't make it any better. And this light one, which I actually quite like because it takes away a lot of focus from these unimportant options, which then again helps me to draw focus and attention onto the option, in this case downloads, which is where I want my users to look. So I'm a big fan of this grayscale option, but it really kind of depends on your user, your interface, and your goal for these graphics. What I can also do, if I go back in here, is simply create my own color palette, and I'll choose that. So I want to, almost similar to the one before, I want this to be dark. This is actually quite nice. I like that. And now the brown element is only used in one case right here. So maybe we actually make this match this gray as well. And so now we have a nice simplified graphic. Yeah, the download option is being exposed and the other elements and buttons are not too overwhelming. Now, if I like this color palette and I want to use it for other screenshots, I can save it. And honestly, that is something I highly, highly recommend. If you're happy with this little selection and how your screenshots are turning out, go ahead, click this little gear icon and choose Save Palette. And I'm going to name this, my name is Anton, so Anton's SUI palette. I think it's kind of funny, so I like doing it. Okay, cool. And now this color palette is available in every single screenshot that I take. So if, for example, I were to go over here, I could then select the Anton SUI palette and then turn on AutoSimplify in order to have that same effect. So let me go back to this particular screenshot because maybe there's even more I want to do. This is looking good. However, I do still think there's too many of these boxes on here that simply don't add any relevance to that particular screenshot. So I'm going to show the originals again just to see what's behind it. And we can see it's mostly non-relevant hotkeys. And then right here we have 3 or 4 additional options. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the Move tool and I'm actually going to re-expose them. So I'm doing a multi-select by clicking and dragging to simply bring these options back. And you'll see why in just a second. As a next step, I actually want to erase or remove these options entirely from my screenshot, so it just looks blank in the background. All right, so the background here is just blank without any things in it, which is why I first deleted the SUIfied elements. As a next step, I select more, and I'm choosing the selection tool within Snagit like this. And from here, I select the rectangle or square shape, and I have to make sure that the autofill right here is being enabled. So Snagit will do an automatic, fantastic job of filling in my background wherever I delete commands or text elements. So right now, as a next step, I'm gonna click and drag and simply draw a little box around the elements I no longer need in my screenshot. And if I hit delete on my keyboard, Snagit will delete that text and fill in my background. It also filled in that little line to make sure that doesn't get broken in the deletion process. And now this area is simply cleaned up and simpler. And I'm gonna go ahead and I repeat the same. Actually, this is the one I wanted to keep because it ties to downloads. But here's two more hotkeys I do not want. And maybe this option right here is also not quite needed. And I could go and try to delete these three. And maybe now I also want to shorten this entire menu, and Snagit has a fantastic feature for that. I'm gonna go back up into more. I'm gonna choose the cutout tool. And now I'm simply gonna click, drag to essentially select the area I don't want to have in my screenshot. And when I let go, it's gonna make a clean cut and simply shrink my menu together. And yeah, this is looking pretty good. So where to go from here? Let me go back into my selection tool because instruction should be click on these items and then on downloads. And this mouse cursor is okay. However, it got picked up a little bit pixelated because I'm on a virtual machine. So I'm gonna delete it and simply add a new nice looking cursor at the right location. And to do that, I'm gonna open the stamps because Snagit has a bunch of different stamps included. And if I simply start typing cursor, or Mauszeiger in German, it will suggest a variety of different styles and options. And I'm gonna go and find this one right here. I'm gonna select it, click, and then I can essentially click to stamp it onto my screen. It's vector based, so I can resize it nicely. It's almost too much, but I'm gonna leave it for this example. And now we have a nice little SUIfied screenshot that shows the user. Click on the three dots, and that's where you find the download option. And the rest of the information is simplified, it's not distracting, and if I'm sending this to anyone, they can hopefully follow it quite well. And honestly, because the word downloads is international, I could use the same screenshot at least in German and English, though there are likely more languages where the screenshot could easily be used as well. All right, let's take another screenshot. I'm gonna bring up my browser and I'm gonna open a website, and I'm sure you have a website as well, or some sort of web service, or maybe your own application that you could simplify. And I encourage you to just take a screenshot out in the wild of something you want to experiment and play with, because working with SUI and creating SUI graphic is something you do need to practice and get a bit of an eye for. In this case, I have a website open. There's a lot of colors, a lot of things happening. Let's simplify it. And as a first step, I need my screenshot again. So I'm gonna hit the delete key. No, not the delete key. I'm gonna hit the print key on my keyboard. I will receive that yellow crosshair, and now I can click, hold, and drag to select the particular area, which I then will want to take a screenshot of and simplify. And again, I'm choosing the little camera icon to capture an image of this particular region. Cool. My screenshot again opens in the Snagit editor, and as a next step, I'm gonna go back and open my Simplify tool, which is now again under the More option. All right, and you might already have noticed that the suggested color palette updated to reflect the dominant colors in this particular image, and it's very clear there's a big green, so of course green is one of the available options. So, and just like before, what I always like to do is I simply like to turn on AutoSimplify to even see what I'm working with. So let's try this. Okay, so far so good. So as you can see, Snagit simplified most text elements. It turned some of these icons 1, 2, 3 into, well, actually show the original so we can really see what happened. It did a decent job on most of them. This icon or user profile picture down here is only partially replaced, but that is okay. We'll get into that in just a second. And it wasn't perfect right here, but nevertheless, those are all easy fixes. So let me select the move tool and do that basic cleanup that I always like to do. So I'm going to select these misaligned items and I'm going to delete them. I'm going to do the same for up here, this other user icon. I'm also going to select these three options because I do want to show the numbers as they are, because I think that would be quite helpful for the user. Now let's turn the original off so we can see this. And I do like it. However, I do think the contrast of the screenshot is too extreme. As I said before, I could change the color, but why don't we use that same color palette we created earlier, right? Anton SUI palette. Let me select it. It gets applied and this already looks a lot better. A nice simplified result of that website, which we can now edit further. So as I did before, some things I do like to do is cleaning things up. So I'm going to go back into my selection tool. I don't think this element right here is going to add much value. So I'm selecting it. Autofill is enabled and I'm going to hit the delete key on my keyboard and I remove this particular part. I'm also going to delete a few more additional things, particularly this one right here, and I'll show you in a second why. And I'm also going to delete this option up here simply to showcase one of the other features. So I'm going back to the Simplify tool, and this time we want to look at the drawing tool and the quick styles. So if you take a look at the quick styles, you see there's different type of tool properties already available, different squares, blocks, and these multi-text elements that you can use to draw custom SUI elements on any graphic that you're working on. So let's say you want to have a different type of text box right here. And an easy way to do it is to simply select one of these styles. The fill color is based on your color palette, but of course adjustable. And now I can draw this element just like a generic text box on my screen. And this is really easy and intuitive. Once I've drawn my basic shape, I can further adjust it using the properties on the right. I can adjust the text height if it's bigger text. I can also adjust the line spacing based on what I am working on. And so this is a nice easy way to create my own SUI elements. Let me repeat the same up here. I'm gonna choose a slightly different color style, slightly different text width. I'm gonna draw this element in. So far so good. So that's really nice and easy. Further, if you're looking in here, there are some other shapes, and I actually use this one quite a bit in order to cover up avatars and user images that I may or may not want to have in my screenshot. So I'm just simply drawing this, putting it here. Great. And even if I wanted to, let me see if that works. I have this one particular one for drawing images. And if I want to cover something up with an image, indicate, oh, there was just an image at the top, I could do so as well. So in a nutshell, that is what simplification with Snagit is all about. After you have taken your screenshot, you have the ability to apply some auto-simplify in which Snagit will automatically detect shapes and text and other elements within your screenshot and replace them with those simplified user interface elements. You have the option to choose and define your own color palette based on the type of screenshot you are working on. And if you're working on a series of screenshots and you want them to have that same color palette and logic applied, it makes sense to save a color palette out so it's available for every single screenshot that you are simplifying. Further, you have the option of using those quick styles to draw your own text boxes, but also elements like avatars or replacements for images that you want to have a bit more neutral and simplified, so you can guide the user's attention to what really matters. And last but not least, in the tool properties on the bottom, the drawing tool as well as the move tool are much more accessible now, so you can use the tools within the Simplify tool to select, delete, and expose and move things that you otherwise would have not been able to access and move. So let's do this one more time because it's simple and fun. So in this example, let's simplify a screenshot of the Windows Explorer or the Mac Finder, depending on which version of your desktop you're on. And as a next step, I'm going to take my screenshot with Snagit. I'm going to hit the print key on my keyboard and select that full application that is currently selected. Now I'm choosing image, and the image will open up in my Snagit editor. And again, pay attention to the color palette that was created. It matches the dominant colors in the screenshot, but yeah, it's not necessarily the color palette that I want to use. And first, what I might actually do is think about parts of my screen that I can reduce and remove before I simplify. Before I was doing it after, sometimes it makes sense to think about that stuff in advance. And so for that, I'm going to go back into my selection tool. I have autofill selected, and for example, I don't think I need to actually have the file size available at the end. I also don't think we need to have this text up here in the middle. We can already remove that to clean that up a little bit. The mouse cursor I'm gonna delete because I can add that at a later point. Maybe I don't need the name of the file folder up here. Maybe that's some privacy concerns that I have. I don't want to expose that per se. And maybe last but not least, I'm actually gonna reduce the amount of elements that are listed right here on the left side, because I honestly don't need quite as many for the instruction or for the representation of the finder that I'm trying to create. So I'm gonna hit the delete key on my keyboard as well. So now we have a more simpler screenshot that is serving as the base for that simplification, which we'll do next. So I'm gonna go up into more, and I have my Simplify tool. And as mentioned before, pay attention to the color palette. And I am doing what I usually do, which is turn on AutoSimplify, simply to see how does it turn out. All right, so far so good. There's definitely some fine tuning that we need to do. And the first thing I notice is those colors. I don't like them. I don't think you would either. But the good thing is we already have various color palettes saved. We can go back to the same color palette I was working with, my SUI colors, simply to stay consistent from screenshot to screenshot. Or maybe let's switch over to the light ones. Nah, Anton's are good. Anton, let's stay with Anton, right? All right. And let's actually show the originals again so we get an idea of what is all there. So now I'm gonna go and select the move tool, because there's some things I do want to show again. And it's actually kind of weird. I want to show all these icons. So I'm selecting all my elements and I'm simply sliding them ever so slightly to the right. Yep, this is the only one that's an exception. That needs to go back a little bit. Oh, I think I dragged too far, no problem. Select them, and here we are, show originals. And now this looks pretty good. Now there might be some elements like this one and this one and this one, which are headers, which I want to give a bit more dominant color to. So I have them selected, and now I go into the fill tool and I'm simply choosing slightly darker colors. Too much, but let's go with this, so they stand out from the rest of them, to kind of create that kind of hierarchy that usually comes with screenshots. I also noticed some more elements that are hidden that I need to re-expose, so I'm selecting them and deleting them. This right here is a search icon. I think that is valuable to expose, just as this one, and maybe the name of this file menu and the step right here. Yeah, so you're already seeing how you simplify and then you go back and kind of clean things up to make sure the screenshot is still easy to follow without overburdening the end user. All right, this brings me to the end of this little SUI workshop that I was able to put together for you here at tekom. I hope you learned a couple of things and were able to try it out yourself. Keep in mind, simplified user interface graphics are a great tactic for any technical communicators. They are really handy in situations where you need to onboard a user to a particular situation, in cases where multiple versions of the same graphic are needed in a few languages, or for parity reasons, or for multiple platforms, and so on. However, SUI is not for all graphics all the time, but rather use it selectively and strategically. If you would like to know more about Snagit and learn more about the SUI tool, I encourage you to check out our tutorials. You will find them within Snagit by going onto Help and choosing Online Tutorials, or by visiting our website www.techsmith.com/tutorial-snagit.html. And this will bring you to our tutorial page, where we have lots of different topics on Snagit basics. But if you scroll further down, you will also see that we have an option for simplification right here. And with that said, if you have any further questions, I am still in the chat in this tool presentation, so please ask your questions or leave your comments and I'll happily get back to you there. Or visit TechSmith at the digital tekom booth anytime this week, start a chat with us on our page, and we'll be able to talk to you and show you many of these details in much, much more detail. So, with that said, I wish you all a great afternoon, a great conference, and a wonderful rest of the year. Goodbye.